Okay, I'm going to start to cover D2, Shrine of the Kuo-Toa. But first, I need to go over a little bit of some stuff I forgot to cover in D1. Some of the changes I made because I'm running with Lamentations. As I said, I got rid of the pluses for magical weapons, but I didn't get rid of the pluses for damage. Only the pluses for hit. But I didn't make them straight out pluses. So instead of a sword doing d8 plus 1, I increased the numbers of sides that uh, the sword would do. So instead of d8 plus 1, it would be a d9. Since I'm on the computer, I can do that. But none of the players really investigated to see what the cloaks of Elvenkind and boots of Elvenkind the Drow were wearing would do, and they didn't take any of the Drow's magical weapons. So that was just the way it was. And that was this map. They were used to veins of the earth. So they're used to really small caves that you had to crawl through. Some of them were too small to crawl through, so you had to slither. Some of them were too small for that, so you had to tilt your shoulders to get through the letterbox squeeze. So it's really small caves. And so they weren't used to being able to walk in a cave. And so to get them used to them, when I first started D1, I used this map. This is actually set up for after D1, but use this map. So I started on the left with the small cave that they could walk single file through. And then I had them go through the middle cave, which they could walk two abreast for most of it. You can see some of the creatures they might have encountered. And then they got to the big cave, which they could walk 4 and 3 abreast in different places in. And here's the D2 cave. I didn't realize that this was different, that there were different ones for D1 through 3 until later. Until after I was running D3 before I noticed that these maps were different from each other. I thought they were the same. So another insight I forgot to talk about in the D1, if it was pretty funny, is that they met the Lich, and the Lich cast Otto's Irresistible Dance on one of the players. I don't know why that's an 8th level spell. It seems too high, but it doesn't have a save, but you got to roll to hit, and it's hard for a magic user to roll to hit, especially a 16th level magic user. The kind of creatures he runs into, it's hard to roll to hit against that. But it's not so hard for a Lich to roll to hit. So he did that to a character, and he also cast a spell called Raise the Dead. It's an original spell that created a horde of 77 zombies that would imitate what the creator was doing, and the players were able to make peace with the Lich. So while they're waiting for Otto's Irresistible Dance to expire, the Lich started dancing, and the zombies started dancing, and the player was dancing, and the other players joined in dancing. So I had a little dance party with the zombies. So that was a bit humorous. But at the end of D1, they rode off on these pack lizards they'd stolen from the Drow. And if you look in the module, here's a map. Yeah, there's all these other sub-caves off the main path. And they're not keyed out, so you got to do it yourself. But as it turns out, I didn't really need to because the players were not at all interested except for in following the railroad. There's a player's map that shows the railroad, but doesn't show all these side passages, and they were not interested in exploring any of that for the most part. Yeah, so after running away on the lizards, they eventually came to here, where it came into, like, there's a little cave system and a river with a big fish and a ferry, and they were able to bargain the ferryman to get them across, but then they killed the ferryman and took his stuff because they're adventurers. Yeah, and so that was, this is Big Kuo-Toa, who's the ferryman. That's the first encounter with the Kuo-Toa. And then, so the next encounter along the way there, this here, they still have the pack lizards, and they ran into a bunch of gnomes, deep gnomes. They all have illusion powers. Now, this is supposed to be a friendly encounter where, you make friends with the gnomes and they give you clues about what's going on. But the trouble is, by this point, the party included a NPC alpha doll, which is a sort of like a drow, looks like a drow to them, and another alpha doll player character who basically looks like a drow to them, and then there's Angel Devil Tibbet the vampire. So basically it looked like a couple of drow and a necromancer had come. So the gnomes took one look at the party and attacked. Started doing illusions, did illusionary wyverns and stuff, and so this was a big fight for the players. But eventually they were able to make peace and go on their way to the next section. Okay, so let me find that. So it's a really big map. Okay, and the way the maps go, assuming that the players are going to come in this entrance into the Kuo-Toa city. And to make this special, I even paid to get Kuo-Toa icons that were cool looking, so I can make this extra special. But this is the one time they decided to take a side trip, and I made a mistake on the map, so they ended up coming in this entrance with their pack lizards and got in a fight with the Kuo-Toa here. And they continued to fight them, and some of them got captured, and the captured ones were brought all the way around the big pool. Now, in D1, we had a fight that lasted like 5 sessions of fight in that one room at the end of D1. And I didn't want to repeat that with the Kuo-Toa, at least not immediately. So, when they were drugged before the idol here and to the different altars here and made to pay a toll, the first character drugged to the altar was made to give a gold piece, so he gave him a gold piece, and they gave him a snail and said, "Here's your pass." And so the players left for about 5 minutes after that. When they realized they'd been fighting the Kuo-Toa for all this time because they didn't have a hall pass. And so they went they got each altar, they get a different pass. And one of the passes was a lobster. And you were supposed to let your lobster loose in the water, but they didn't. The Darrow's character didn't want to do that. He wanted to keep his lobster. And so he went over here and looked in the window where there was a Kuo-Toa living and bought a chamber pot from them and scooped some water out of the water here and put his lobster in it and named it Pincher. And a miscast Speak with the Animals gave the illusion or delusion that he could speak to the lobster. So I was sending private messages from then on from his delusion of the lobster, things he thinks the lobster's saying to him. Meanwhile, the Alpha Doll, basically fighter magic user, had successfully cast Speak with Animals. And he'd done it permanently. So the lobster was actually speaking to him while he's pretending, the Darrow's just thinks it's speaking to him. So they went to the library, they explored a little bit, and finally the Kuo-Toa took them to a little private, they wanted a place to sleep, so Kuo-Toa took them here, right there, and put them in jail. So they were in jail now, and eventually were able to talk their way out and talk their way up to going to the chief. And they were able to do this in part because they invented something they called lobsterism and tried to convince the chief that lobster could talk, that there was a religion that, they had basically rebranded magic. They weren't doing drow magic. It was lobsterism they were doing. It was the religion of lobsterism. And so using that, they were able to talk their way out of Kuo-Toa jail and even talked one of the Kuo-Toa cleric assassins to becoming a henchman to the Darrows. And the first cleric of Pincher the Lobster, who the Darrows is deluded into thinking he can talk to. And so they were allowed to go on their way. And so, for the second time, they took a side passage. And this time, this side passage took them to here, to the secret vault of the Kuo-Toa, which the Gurgle-Gut, which was the new henchman, thought was the well. He thought the well was the secret passage. But as it turns out, the actual secret treasury was not the well, but there was actual treasure, and they fought a specter and lost many levels in the process. However, Lamentations is on a silver standard, with 1 silver piece equaling 1 XP, and gold is worth 50 XP, and I didn't change that for running this series. So the amount of gold they got in here led to a lot of levels once they survived fighting the Lich. So I'm surprised, I ran over my 10 minutes I wanted to do, but I'm surprised that I was able to do that. Yes, I can show you some of the pictures of the past adventures. Okay, so here they are. I took pictures while they were in place. So here they are shortly after they killed the Kuo-Toa guard. And here they are fighting the Deep Gnomes, which they renamed the Dark Smurfs. So that's my 2 pictures of this in the fight.